Hello friends, today we have a bit of an unhinged video concept. I'm going to be recommending you books that I love, books I have given 5 stars, based off of 1-star reviews that other people have given. Last year, I saw Riley Marie make this incredible video where she read books that intrigued her based off of 1-star reviews that she was like, oh, I think based off of you hating this book, I'm actually going to love it. I thought that video was hilarious, and ever since then, I've been wanting to do kind of a spin on that sort of idea. So today, I'm gonna recommend you books that I have loved based off of reviews of people who hated the book. Obviously, we're all allowed to have different opinions about books, and we're allowed to like different things in books. And the reason why I've chosen these specific 1-star reviews is because these people very obviously didn't like the things that I liked a lot. So hopefully they will be the perfect way for you to understand whether or not you will like these books or not, because a lot of them, you're either gonna love them or you're gonna hate them. So I think the 1-star reviews are gonna be very helpful for you for deciding whether or not you wanna read this book. I also have some sprinkled in here that are just hilarious if you have read the books. So there's some fun inside jokes in here as well. I've got 11 books to get through, so let's get started. The first book is A Psalm for the Well-Built, which is one of my favorite books of all time. This is the story of a monk and a robot. We have our T-Monk Dex, who's trying to figure out what their purpose is in life, and the robot, who's having its first contact with humanity in a very long time, and the robot has a question: what do humans need? It's in this world that is similar yet different to ours. It envisions a world in which we create a post-industrialist society. This first 1-star review fits into the category of people not enjoying when books swear. This first review shares with us the first sentence of the book: sometimes a person reaches a point in their life when it becomes absolutely essential to get the fuck out of the city. Disappointed. That's the opening sentence of the book. Read a few more pages to confirm it doesn't get better. Chambers is better than this. The amount of 1-star reviews about this book that were so upset that this book swears, in addition to being cozy, broke people's brains. They didn't understand how you could have explicit language and a cozy book. I will also say there were a ton of reviews that I did not want to give any time to, that were talking about they, them pronouns and how it really was just breaking their brains and they couldn't understand anything. And that's one of the reasons why I love this book. I think it's a really fantastic way for people to practice using they, them pronouns and get their brains used to them. And a lot of these reviewers could not handle that. The second one I have is titled Boring Lecture on Moral Philosophy. This book supposedly is science fiction, but in reality it is a sappy, saccharine moral lecture to love one another and embrace one's life. Personally can't imagine being so pressed about a book that's trying to give you warm, fuzzy feelings. The second book we're gonna review is And Then I Woke Up. This is a book that is much more than a zombie book. It's very short. It's a lot of commentary on how narratives can get away from us and how really being bought into your echo chamber and your media narrative can be incredibly damaging. The zombie plague isn't an actual zombie plague, but rather a narrative that convinces you that everyone around you is a zombie. So the people who are affected will go into fight or flight mode and go and kill a bunch of zombies and try to protect themselves and their family by killing people that they love that are close to them because they're now zombies. And then they wake up and realize that they have killed regular people and not zombies, and it was them who was sick and not the zombies themselves. Incredible book, highly recommend. The 1-star review I have for you is really disappointing, not at all the spooky vibe I was looking for. Felt more like a social and political commentary on how the media controls us and divides us, with a zombie apocalypse for a metaphor. Boring. Loved everything about this book. Next up is Catherine House. This book is one of my favorite things I've ever read, and I know that so many people hate it. It is a dark academia. We are at Catherine House. It is this super prestigious university. It's just 3 years, but you're on campus the entire time. You're basically cut off from the outside world, and it gets culty and spooky and weird, and I thought it was such a real depiction of what life is like in college, made me so nostalgic for college, in addition to being this incredibly nebulous, confusing, in a good way, culty book about academia. The ending is super ambiguous, and I know a lot of people hated it, including this reviewer. If you knew how Catherine House ended, you would never start it. The book is enough of a hodgepodge of blind alleys, ciphers of characters, and that deadly mix of hedonism and anhedonia granted only to the particularly privileged already, and then you hit the final sentence: you're in the house and the house is in the woods, but the book is thrown across the room. This is one of those situations where I 100% get it. If you don't like an ambiguous ending, you are going to hate this book. but I love an ambiguous ending, and I love this book. The second review I have for this book says, I lasted until the 65% point and just could not see myself going forward anymore. It is a slow and strange read with self-centered characters that scream entitlement. The only character that I liked ended up dead, and the chanting, OMG, what is with that? Cult culture? Won't say anything more. I, for one, loved the chanting and the cult culture. And our last one for this book, well, that was the weirdest, creepiest book I've ever tried to read, and I got over halfway through before putting it down. Ethical questions on strange experiments, motivations behind characters, truth and lies in academic institutions. Odd. And they're 100% not wrong. It is weird, it is creepy. It is truth and lies in academic institutions, and it is odd. And you already know how I feel about it. Women Eating is a literary horror in which nothing much happens, and we have this woman who is a vampire. We're following her journey as she kind of leaves her mother for the first time. Her mother is the one who always like provided her with the blood that she needs to survive. And now that she's kind of out on her own, she goes on this artistic journey, trying to make friends with people, trying to understand how to feed herself and procure blood for herself. I think these reviews are actually my favorites. The first one is just absolutely hilarious. She barely ate. And the second one, if any of these is gonna convince you to read a book, it's gonna be this one, okay? All I remember about this is her killing the duck and feeling its whole life and what it was like to fly. And now sometimes when people talk about eating duck, I forget that when you eat duck, you do not find out what it feels like to fly, and have to restrain myself from asking them about that. This book is so beautiful. If you like a monster story, if you like a Frankenstein type story, you are going to absolutely adore this. It does have so much to say about life and death. And that duck scene really does stick with me. Our Wives Under the Sea is one of my best books of 2023. If you've ever had to grieve someone or something that is missing, possibly dead, like if you've ever lost a pet or you've had someone in your family who you love go missing, you need to read this book. It is an absolutely incredible exploration of grief. We have this couple, they're married. One of the women is on this submarine journey for like 3 months, goes missing, and we're following both her experiences and her wife's experiences as she is kind of waiting to find out information, and also what happens when her wife does come back and the journey that she is on, the way that they are so disconnected, and it gets like a little weird and speculative and is just one of my favorite things I've ever read. This is a really long review and I have to read it because it is absolutely hilarious. Mary, I sat on my couch. I'm a lesbian. My wife is suffering and she's turning on all the faucets in the shower. I'm worried about how to pay the water bill, but I won't make any attempt to turn the water off. Call the doctor? Call the workplace? Okay. Leah, do you know jellyfish? Do you know octopus? Burning meat smell. Mateo and Jelka. Does Jelka know I'm a lesbian? Because she's Catholic. Mateo whistles. Oops, my skin is translucent, like a deep sea fish. Did you know I hated the ocean, but then I lived in the ocean? My dad was a jerk. Did you know him? Miri, I hate people. They suck. I'm a lesbian. My mom died. I remember a time when Leah did something cute, like touch my foot with her foot. We are a couple, but also I'm mad at her because she underwent something traumatic in the ocean, so now I'm gonna be absolutely selfish and terrible partner to her. Leah, blub blub. Miri, I'm not gonna do anything except say something surprisingly relatable out of nowhere, then be a twat and replay past parties in my mind where I hated everyone. My wife's being a problem again. Hey, I'm a lesbian and no one understands. Oof, neighbors being loud, listening to TV again. This book was painful and the character of Miri was even more painful. The prose is only decent, but because it is languidly depressing, it's tricking people into thinking it's a good book. Disappointing. Leah blub blub, hilarious. I love this next review because I think it perfectly sums up this book. One of the weirdest books I've ever read, and I don't mean that in a compelling way. There is some buildup initially. Is this a mystery, conspiracy thriller, a novel about grief, an allegory? But all this fizzles out to is some kind of surreal fantasy with no real reveal at the end. So true. I still loved it. One of my favorite books that nobody talks about, if you like House of Leaves, you need to try this. We are following this guy who's being chased through the pages of this book by a conceptual thought shark. Here he is. He's beautiful. I love him. This book is Manic Pixie Dream Girl meets conceptual fish. I can't. I get it. I still loved it. There are no words to express how annoying this book was to me, and if there were, Stephen Hall would probably make a fort out of them. And that is so true. He probably would make a fort out of your words. This book is so meta in such a pretentious way, and I ate up every single page of it. If you're an Aquarius who likes Jaws and existential conversations, you are going to eat this up. So Happy For You is a weird little thriller that gets absolutely over the top. We're following this best friend duo. We have our bride. We're far enough in the future that marriage has gotten super weird, and not so far in the future that we still see the roots of how we got there in our own society today. Things have gotten absolutely crazy. Women are considered like rotten if they are past 30 and haven't gotten married yet. And so we have this bride and her maid of honor, and they are just butting heads constantly. They're both insufferable. And we see this toxic friendship just devolve, and I loved it. Definitely not for everyone, and not for this reviewer who says, "Say what now? What even was this?" This was a book I saw highly recommended on YouTube. To me, it was a train wreck that I couldn't look away from, unfortunately. The last handful of chapters went completely off the rails. This is getting 1.5 stars for me because I loved the cover. The cover is objectively fantastic. I absolutely love the cover of this. And yeah, the last couple chapters went completely off the rails. If you love an over-the-top thriller, you're going to love this. Natural beauty was everything that Rouge by Mona Awad wanted to be. And this book just absolutely exceptional. We are talking about the beauty industry and beauty as a concept and what it is to be beautiful, what it is to be hideous, and the ways that our like societal scripts change based on how we are perceived. Also talking about the way that racism plays into our beauty standards, and really just is a wild ride that feels very literary horror. I absolutely loved this. There's a lot of uncomfortable body stuff in here, which this reviewer hated, which is so fair. If you're into reading about women breastfeeding gibbons, casual mentions of cannibalism, and several unnecessary descriptions of areolas and nipples, including this gem, her nipples look like the soft snouts of baby pigs, then this book may be the right fit for you. I need a cleanse after reading this. Hilarious. Gideon the Ninth is one of my favorite books of all time, and I nearly also pulled reviews for Harrow, but I figured we should stick to the first book for this one. This is Lesbian Necromancers in Space. It is witty, it has tons of banter. We're following our main character Gideon. She's a swordswoman. We're understanding all of these different things about the necromancy that's going on in here through these various tests and challenges that are going on. It is over the top, it is confusing, it has many subplots. I did not understand what was happening for most of this book, but I had a wild ride and a fantastic time. This reviewer says, "I don't get it. Abandoned and never to return at around 30%. I almost drowned in the snark and the clever, witty dialogue." I normally don't rate books I can't finish, but I will have to from now on to prevent the Goodreads recommendations algorithm from recommending similar books to me. If I never hear or read about this book again, it will be too soon. I would not recommend picking this up if you're not already a heavy science fiction or high fantasy girly, because it is confusing, but if you like snarky, witty banter, you're gonna eat this up. This next book also made my top 10 of the year, and it is The September House. This book really snuck up on me, and I wasn't sure that I loved it right after I had finished it, but I just keep thinking about this book over and over again. It really is my favorite type of cozy horror, where there is over-the-top, disgusting horror happening, but it is hilarious in the way that it has been set up, and the way that it is funny in this book is that our main character is so nonchalant about everything. She has all these rules that she follows in order to make the horror not so horror for herself, and she interacts with all these ghosts in these different ways in order to get them to not follow her around and bite her, all the while she's trying to hide all the horrifying things that are happening in the house from her daughter, who's come to stay with her because her husband has gone missing. We're trying to unpack that mystery in addition to learning all of the ways that this house gets a little bit crazy in the month of September. Ultimately, this book is an incredible allegory about being in an abusive relationship, and I found that to be very tastefully done, and something that I personally definitely needed to hear this commentary about all of these rules that you need to follow in order to live a safe life, and that being wrapped up in this hilarious over-the-top horror book was perfect for me. Or if that's too many words for you, you could listen to this summary from a reviewer. Book summary: The walls drip blood. And they do indeed. The ending of this review is hilarious. Such a disappointment. Picked this book thinking it'd be a thriller, 2 pages in, realized it's horror. Got a bit excited since I haven't read any horror books yet. After the first chapter, noticed it's rather a disgrace to the name of horror. I can't even call this a comedic novel. The main character was so flat, she didn't care about her house's walls and floors start bleeding at September. I can't remember the reason for why September. She was so nonchalant about everything. But in all honesty, I would have stayed in that house too, as long as I had a housemaid ghost who do all the house chores and make me good tea. You know what? Same. I am feral for a good cup of tea. And the last one we'll be talking about is Several People Are Typing. Again, I think this was either on my honorable mentions or my top 10 of 2023. This is a story of a man who gets his consciousness gets uploaded into his company's Slack channel and no one believes him that he's stuck in the Slack channel, and it's like his whole journey of trying to figure out what's going on. It gets incredibly strange and confusing and also has really profound things to say about love and sunsets. I read this in an afternoon and loved every second of it, especially as someone who uses Slack at work every single day. I think if you're someone who works from home and uses Slack as your primary mode of communication with your coworkers, you're gonna think that this is absolutely hilarious. The inside joke I have for those of you who have read this is this review: "This did not help center me, dusty stick emoji." This next review says that the book has an incredibly interesting premise, surely discussing the politics of a workspace, the way in which cyberspace becomes a place in our lives. There is much in the treatment of the topic that leaves itself to desire, however. The author shows off a knowledge of Yeats, or specifically one famous work of Yeats that has also seen much misinterpretation, nor does the writer lean into this entire feat. There is, in the manner of living in this era, meta-referrals to how the character only knows a single poem and so on, so that the entire book is just kitsch. It appears superfluous and makes fun of this superfluity, and then says, that is the point. 1 star for the few odd moments where a little bit of tension shines through. Avoidable book, a spoiler review should suffice in its stead. I truthfully would not recommend anyone who doesn't interact with Slack to read this book. It will go over your head. It's not going to be funny. It's very much a meta. It's all told in Slack messages. It's not going to be an enjoyable experience for you, but if you are someone who uses Slack and likes a book that does get a little bit pretentious, you're gonna love this one. And those are all of my recommendations for books that I personally loved based off of 1-star reviews of people who did not like these books. I'm genuinely so curious to hear in the comments if you like this video or not. I would love to do this again in the future, but I'm only going to do that if you also think this is funny in the way that I think it is funny. I'm also incredibly curious to hear, have you ever read a book based off of a 1-star review? Has a 1-star review ever convinced you to read a book? I feel like sometimes I hear people giving poor reviews of something and I'm like, that is exactly what I need to read next. So let me know in the comments, we can chat about them together. And if you've read any of the books that we chatted about, let me know, do you agree with my 5-star review or do you agree with the 1-star review? Either are totally fine. I'm just incredibly curious to know. Share your thoughts with the class. I love you all. I will see you next week at 11 a.m. Eastern. If you're new here, I would love for you to stick around and join our cozy little community of book lovers here on the internet. Okay, I'll see you next week. Bye.